For an athlete to be successful, even if that athlete is LeBron, he needs a team, same as in business. That's why more small to mid-sized businesses in South Florida are choosing Greenlight Tek, the full-service concierge IT company that always gets it right. Greenlight Tek advises, monitors, supports, and keeps your important data backed up and secure. They will even manage your vendors. Call Greenlight Tek at 561-325-9997. That's 561-325-9997. Mention that 5 Reasons sent you, and you will get a free assessment. And if you sign up, your first month is also free. Be unstoppable. Visit greenlighttek.com. That's Greenlight, Tek.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome into episode 60 of the 5 Reasons podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick, here as always with Chris Whittingham. Thank you for finding us. We're on iTunes, also Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, all of those other apps, and check out the other podcasts that are in our network. One of the things we've done that's been really popular here on the pod has been a Heat story series, and we've started to talk to people about their days playing for the Heat or coaching the Heat or broadcasting the Heat. We feel like we need to give a little love to the Dolphins, and we're catching up with this guy Chris as he's living the dad life, waiting for his daughter in a parking lot, which is something that I'm familiar with now. So fill us in, Chris Chambers. How old is your daughter now, and you're basically like chaperone around South Florida?
I am super daddy daycare right now. This is my third. Well, actually, I have 3 kids. So my son, he's 11, so he's good to go. He's about to go into middle school, which is great. And then my daughter, she's 6 years old. So she's finishing up, first grade there, and actually kindergarten, going into first grade next year. So obviously in the last few days, and I have a small one at home at 10 months. So I've been spending a lot of time with them, needless to say, and parking lot pipping with the other parents, doing all that type of stuff was really cool. So, it's interesting. I'm like, man, I got to get her in some after school programs. So I literally drop her off at like 8. And then next thing I know, I'm at 1 o'clock. I'm here picking her up. So I definitely got to get a life right now.
I know that pretty well. So what is she into at this point? She's 6. I mean, I'm going through the Frozen and Moana stages because mine's turning 4 in July. She already gone through those? Has she moved on to something else?
Yeah, Frozen's done. It was great. We actually seen Frozen over at the arena. That was really cool. We were Yo Gabba Gabba. I don't know if you went through that. That was the early stages. What is this show turned into already? So now we're there. She's getting a little older. She's past the door and all that stuff. It's funny how some of these like old school princesses and Sesame Street and all these like old Elmo, all these people are just starting to resurface all over the place. So she actually watches stuff with my youngest daughter now too, who's 10 months too. So I'm getting a little bit of everything at this point.
All right, we're talking to Chris Chambers here. You know him as one of the best receivers in Dolphins history, second-round pick back in 2001. We're not going to talk about the first-round pick that year because it didn't work out quite as well as Chris did long-term. But Chris ended up 4th on the team all-time in receiving yards, 5th on the team all-time in receptions. You're pretty familiar with the guy who's right next to you on those lists, right? I mean, do you you took over his locker, I remember, when you were with the Dolphins. Have you gotten into it with McDuffie at all about kind of where you guys stand on those lists?
I haven't. We haven't really had that conversation. I do know, and I haven't looked at this in a long time, that I was very close to passing him. I don't know if it was receptions. I think it was maybe yards or something like that. You got to check that for me. But it was like not even that many yards. I want to say it was like 15 yards or under 100 yards or something like that. And I was hoping to be signed back to the Dolphins so I can get past that. And but I don't know exactly what those numbers are. But we haven't had the conversation. I would love to have that conversation with him. Obviously, he played with Dan the Man, so you got to give him an asterisk for that. But besides that, man,
you would have smoked his ass if you played with Marino.
Absolutely, man. But he was tough, man. I loved to watch him play. He mentored me some when I came in, so I really enjoyed that. And then just to be able to have that knowledge and experience around me was really cool. And he's from Ohio too, so we connected instantly.
Yeah, that's true. And he's actually going to be hosting a podcast on our network called Fish Tank, Dolphins Tales from the Deep. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get a call from him on that one. That's debuting in July. All right, for part one of this, Chris, I want to go back to the early years. And I want to go back to, you probably don't remember this. I do. A conversation that you and I had, a long conversation on South Beach, sitting at Wet Willie's, I believe, on Ocean Drive. It was after your first season. Your first year, you had 48 catches, 883 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. You had a couple of multiple touchdown games during that season where Jay actually threw a pretty nice deep ball to you on a couple of those that I remember. And I remember sitting there talking with you about what you wanted your career to be. As you look back at the totality of it, did it turn out? I mean, you had, some great moments. You had Pro Bowl moments. We're going to talk a little bit about the Thanksgiving game and some of the really big games that you have. When you look back at your career in totality, was it what you expected?
I was more of a day-to-day guy, week to week, year to year. I had very simple goals. The goals are literally to be better in every category every year. And believe it or not, those goals, actually, if you look at the numbers, were pretty, for the most part, for catches and receptions, they always creeped up. I think the first 5 years, they were always steadily creeping up. And then obviously once we got into the 6th year, and probably I don't even know what head coach or how many coordinators or how many receiver coaches at that time, it kind of declined. And I believe it declined the year that Wes Walker came in, and he was getting all the little dinks and dunks. So he was just highly targeted at that point. And, I kind of went down that year. But for the most part, it was actually a little bit more than I expected. I've never, often had yearly goals, but I didn't have a career goal. Man, I want to have 10,000 yards and I want to be the best receiver of all time. And I that just didn't really have that in my thinking. I was just always a good team player. And so that's why I never really got a chance to get into major conversations about, getting the ball or demanding the ball or having targets and stuff like that. And obviously, I look back now, and I'm like, shit, man, I should have been doing. Okay, can I cuss on this show?
Yeah, go on.
Yes, that's different from radio, Chris. Cuss as much as you want.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not a big cursor anyway, but I would throw a couple out there every once in a while. But yeah, for the most part, it's just I played the way I need to play because I just did everything I did just to get the win more than anything else. And I do feel like sometimes it's like, man, if they just give me the ball, we'll have better chances to win games. And that's pretty much how my career went. And, 1 year led to another. And just the inconsistency of everything that we just talked about kind of dampened it now that I look back on it. And I'm like, man, I probably was missing about 15, 20 touchdowns. I probably was missing about another 100 catches. And you know what? I probably would have been close to some Hall of Fame status if we had a consistent kind of system or quarterback. So, I'm biting it now, but when I was playing, I didn't think about those things.
So you mentioned the idea of you noticing that Wes Welker was taking some of your targets, but then you sort of couch it by saying, if they had thrown the ball towards me, we would have won more games. Is that sort of the way that because I think very often receivers get tagged as selfish when they sort of think about their own targets or sort of wanting the ball more, but is it almost more about, I think we can help the team win if I get the ball more? No doubt. No doubt. And I didn't never put that out there because I wasn't out front, especially earlier on in my career. I was just taking advantage of all the opportunities that was given to me, knowing that, at some point I'm going to make some plays. And it really didn't hit me. And I don't know if we ever even told this story about when Saban came in, and that was actually the year I went to the Pro Bowl, and he brought me in the office. And remember we struggled the first half of that year. I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was the first year, and we struggled the first half. And then we went on a hellified winning streak the last 6 or 7 games. We're literally the hottest team in the NFL at that point. And he brought me in the office mid-season, and he was like, man, in order for us to win games, you're going to have to play perfect. And I'm looking at him like, out of everybody, you got Jason, you got Zach, you got Sam, you got Ricky, you got all these guys, and you're telling me, in order for us to win games, I have to play perfect. And so once he told me that, it let me know what he thought of me as a player and what the organization thought of me as a player. And I literally stepped my game up from there on out and ended up having one of my best seasons based on some of those smaller conversations and him giving me the confidence to be able to do that. So when people talk about Saban, this and that, I've always been kind of more
slightly towards him because I felt like I've had good experiences from him, and I learned a lot of his methodology and philosophies. I got it, and I don't know if I got it because I was more of a younger guy than what he's used to having instead of an older veteran that probably see through a lot of the BS. But it was all cool for me from there.
It's interesting you talk about that with Nick. You take a look at that season 2005. You were targeted 166 times that year, so that was the most. That was the most of your career. You had 82 catches, 1,118 yards, 11 touchdowns. Okay. So I mean, you were averaging over 5 receptions a game, and then you had 154 targets the next year. So those were your 2 highest targeted seasons. And actually, you know, we take a look back at that 05 season, which you mentioned. You guys did start 3-7 and then had this 6-game winning streak.
Yep.
And Gus played really well that year. You guys seem to have a connection with you and Farad. It was just that one season that you had with him. But I want to get into your comments on Saban because I find this really fascinating because I know that JT had a good relationship with Saban also. And I know that a lot of other players did not. And I've always sort of had this theory about Nick that when he came to the pros, the big problem for him was that in college he could control everything, right? He can control which players he had on the roster. He could control the media. He could control everything about practices and really, I mean, be the king of the town that he was in. And as you know, and I know you follow other sports pretty closely, it's just not the case in pro sports. I'm just curious from your perspective, what did other players think of him? Like, what were the interactions with him? Do you think that there were missteps from him, you know, not just the personal conversations you had with him that worked, but did you think there were things that he could have done differently that maybe this would have been a longer tenure for him in Miami?
You know, I just felt like at that point I still didn't have as many years up in my under my belt to even care about what they did upstairs. Like JT and them at that time, of course, they was fully involved in probably a lot of different decision makings, and Nick did have a group. He had a good 10-man, 12-man group, and I think we had talked about this before. But he had a leadership group that he had, and it was more than just captains. It literally was all the veterans and guys that he trusts and guys who play the game, and guys who have experience. And I just remember being able to go to some of those meetings. I didn't say one word ever. I thought about saying some stuff. Listen, I had some good suggestions. They just never came out. They just never came out. I don't know why. I was just still shy, I guess. But, I was always just listening to, like, some of the other guys talk about it. And when you got Jason and Sam and you say, I don't know if Sam was around the time, but you got certain guys, you just kind of let them talk first. You kind of let them say what they need to say, and then you just kind of fall back. So I wish I was more, like, assertive during that time because I feel like there would have been some good messages I could have put out there. And I think I probably would have gained even more respect from my teammates to be able to kind of step up and do that. But, I just didn't take that chance, man. I fell back on most of those leadership meetings.
So can you give us a story of Nick Saban at his loudest and angriest?
That was a lot, man. That was a lot. He was more prone on the defensive side. So I seen him go at these guys all the time. All the time he went at them. He hung out a lot with the cornerbacks because that was probably more his specialty, and then being a defensive-minded coach. So, we didn't really have that type of relationship on the offensive side of the ball. But it seemed like he was always kind of yelling and cussing almost every practice, and that spawned to all the other coaches yelling and cussing, and then end up being all the players yelling and cussing. And JT, I don't know if you noticed or remember this, JT has never really been a guy that was like that. But I promise you that year he was yelling and cussing. and he's not even like that type of person, but he was saying some words that I did not ever hear JT say. And I don't know if he remembered that. I don't know if that was a turning point in his career or whatever it was during that time. But, I can't pinpoint one exact moment. There was some funny moments. Obviously, we can talk about that at some point. But now I can't pinpoint one moment that he just got extremely frustrated. And at least to me, he pretty much respected everything I did, and we had a really good relationship. So I didn't get a chance to see that side personally.
Well, then give us the funny stuff. Then what do you remember that was funny?
Oh gosh, don't let me go there, please.
No, please do.
Well, you already know the number one thing. The number one was the stripper moment. I don't know, y'all probably heard it from Shannon. there's no doubt that when we had that team meeting during minicamp, some of the guys thought it'd be a great idea to bring a couple of ladies from some of the gentleman clubs to give Coach a nice little lap dance. And it was extremely funny. I think that was like one of the most funniest things. And he couldn't help but just go with it. But the fact that we had the audacity to even do something like that was crazy, man. And I think it kind of broke the mold a little bit. It broke the mold a little bit, and everybody kind of enjoyed the situation. But I don't think that'll ever happen in anybody else's locker room but ours, man. And I thought that was an extremely interesting situation.
What was your best moment during that period of time? I mean, I have one game that comes to mind. I'm just curious if it comes to mind for you. I mean, just what was the one game where you felt it all came together for you?
That's tough. And I remember we were talking about this. It's like I'm more seasonal. So it's more like every season had like different moments. So, I would probably break it down by seasons. And, just coming into the NFL, it was I didn't really know what to expect, but obviously playing in the Big Ten, I was tough, I was physical, I was athletic. I wasn't as good as a real receiver route runner during that time, but I was very good on the 50-50 balls. I knew how to get in space and I knew how to make plays. So that kind of carried me for a few years alone. But coming in, when I made my first catch in practice, and that's when I felt like I belonged. And I remember it's one of the things that stick out a lot. And I caught probably about a 40-yard pass, actually against Jamar Fletcher. It was against Jamar Fletcher in practice, like one of the first practices. And I was like, man, this is just, wow, this is cool. And this is like where I'm supposed to be. And then the season just kind of progressed. And when I came in, it was, I had guys in front of me like OJ, even though he had a toe issue at the time, but he was still in the locker room. You had James McKnight, who had just joined the team. You had DJ Ward, who just joined the team. You had Rondé Gaston, who was the number one receiver, at the time. So, now that I look at it at a veteran standpoint, them guys probably was a little bit threatened by me. But at the same time, they didn't show that. They always felt like they helped me, mature within my career. And then as that season progressed, I started returning kicks. I did not return a kick since high school. And so they wanted me to play special teams, so I was returning kicks. I was just straight going up the middle and then hitting the sideline. Because I was literally just watching this not too long ago. I got like this big archive of all my top plays. And every time I'll break and I'll run to the sideline. Now, if you return the kick, if you break it up the gut, then most likely you're probably going to have a good chance of taking the end zone. But for whatever reason, I used to kind of shy away from some of the guys coming down. I would hit the sideline and I would make a play. And then from the kickoffs, I actually got a chance to play in the game. I made my first game. I made a couple great plays, which was really cool because our first game was in Tennessee. If you remember, It was a night game in Tennessee. It was like it was a Sunday night game or something like that.
I think so.
And it was the crowd. I mean, Tennessee was really good too. I mean, that's when they had Javon Curse and all the boys, and we went up there, and I believe we came out with the victory that game, and we really handled them. And it was a chance to really see a different type of team. With my involvement, because I was, more of a speed threat, and then they added James, and then they added Diedrich, and we had Ogden, and so we had a kind of a complete receiver corps at that time, and that was the big story about us, and we were just all feeling good. But as the season progressed, I started making more plays, I started getting in a little bit more. I stopped doing special teams after a couple times because the guys wasn't blocking, so they literally took me off of it. And then from there, I got my first opportunity when Rondé Gaston went out. And we all know when a guy goes out, there's always an opportunity for another guy to kind of come in. And making my first start in the Indianapolis game, and then making my first touchdown and second touchdown in the same game. Those were humongous moments that I will never forget. Because coming in, I actually was a guy who would always make a play, but I always fall on the ground. Like I always just dive. I got to make it look spectacular. So that first one, I came up under. I didn't dive for the ball. I actually caught it up under myself, and I was able to run to the end zone. And that was just pretty cool because it was probably the most beautiful ball that Jay has ever thrown. I mean, he launched it from about the 10-yard line, and I caught it from 20-yard line. It was a good 50, 60-yard throw, and I kind of ran in. And then we ended up winning that game too, in a very tight game. So that game itself, just having your first touchdown, your second touchdown, and then I just became really kind of streaky. I had another game in Buffalo where I had 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So a very tight game, same situation. I had scored earlier in the game, and we were down late in the fourth quarter, and I made a hellified catch along the sideline, and it was just like a coming to like the world feeling for me. And it was great, man, because we were up. It was cold, and I was used to playing in the cold, so it always fit me well. When we had to travel up north, I always had good games in the cold. And then I just kind of kept going. Then I had the Monday night game somewhere around that time, and I was just smoldering hot at that point. I probably scored 3 or 4 touchdowns in like 2 or 3 games, and made a couple of touchdowns that game. So it was like three games my rookie year. I had 2 touchdown games. And you see, when I look at some of the film and stuff, they used to have like, they call me like Baby Moss, or I'm the next Moss, or, I was getting compared to all these different guys. Even when I was coming out for the draft, I was getting compared to Tim Brown at one point. So without even really know his illustrious career, that was pretty cool too. So you just, got a chance to kind of see me mature within like one season and make a lot of great plays. And I think that was probably the most memorable just from the season 1 of my NFL career.
All right, so we move on to season 2, and I remember this vividly, and I don't know how well you remember it because of what happened in the game. So we go to Denver, and the Dolphins, I believe you guys were 4-1 at the time. You looked like maybe the best team in the AFC, actually, at that point. And you go into Denver, and that was the game that Alindo Mare makes a late kick.
Yeah.
But 2 other things happened. Well, actually 3 things. One of them we didn't even realize at the time. But 3 things happened in that game, and I thought that this just totally derailed that entire regime. And I don't think it gets talked about quite enough. One is Aronde got hurt in that game, and I don't think we recognized at the time how bad that was. Another was Jay Fiedler. I remember being sort of in the bowels of the stadium, and Jay getting rushed off to get X-rays. And of course, Jay ended up missing 6 games, and you guys went 2-4 during that time. But also, you took one of the most vicious hits I've ever seen over the middle in that game from Kenoy Kennedy. What do you remember about that whole sequence?
Yeah, that was for one. We were going to Denver, and it was once again a great atmosphere. It was at night. We barely can breathe. You already know we were high altitude, but the atmosphere was just like unbelievable. And we were winning games, like you said before. And I was running a route. It was called a skinny post. It's like a timing route. And it was one of my best routes because everything is kind of on time. And Jay tends to kind of throw those like up high. I have no problem with high balls. I actually love catching high balls. It's like I have more concentration on the ball when I have to really look at it, and I can use my extension. But at that point, I went up for the ball, and Kenoy caught me right. I actually got nudged by the defender, and Kenoy caught me right up under the chin. Now, the backstory of that is that me and James McKnight thought it'd be cool if we try these new helmets out. And they had you had the Riddell helmet, and then the NFL was experimenting with another helmet that was more like aerodynamic. And I don't even know the name because I wish I knew the name, and I'll sue them right now. I don't even know. I wish I knew. But we tried it. We literally tried it, and it was a cooler looking helmet. And I think that was part of it, just by changing that up. But then I got hit really nice. And obviously when you get concussions, there's two ways you can get them. You can get them by like banging the back of your head on the ground, and you can get them. I actually have both before, and you can get them with like more of like a whiplash effect. And so mine was more like a whiplash effect, and just being on the ground. And that was the first time I've ever been knocked out of a game in my entire life. And I kind of woke back up into the locker room at that point, throwing up all over everywhere, very nauseous. But I was watching the game, and that picked up the game, to be honest with you. It really did. My teammates had my back, and we ended up playing a hell of a game from there. I mean, Pat had a really great interception. Lindo had the kick. I mean, the guys played great from there on out. And but it was tough for me, because I had to actually fly back from that part of the country all the way back home. And then I was in the hospital for 3 days after that. And, and this is when, I didn't learn about, unfortunately, they don't really go over concussion stuff with us because it's a hitting thing. But I didn't learn about what concussions mean or anything because we were never educated about it with the NFL until the movie actually came out. And that's when I was like, that blew my mind because I was like, man, all this information that the NFL could have been giving us all this time, all this research they've probably been doing during that time, it would have been nice to know some of these things were going on. And, I don't know if it was one of them things where it kind of just scared as a player and the player's a little bit timid. But it was rough, man. I missed I think I missed the next game. And then we went up to Green Bay and played. And you know how just playing in Green Bay alone is just, it's tough. And I was back in Wisconsin, so I was really excited. But I was very scared to go across the middle. I think I missed a couple balls, and I really didn't feel myself, and really until the next game after that when I took a good shot and I was able to get from it. So that's what I remember about that whole situation. It was rough at the time, but, the team bounced back in the Denver game, and then we took a slid, those next 6 games.
Wanted to ask some follow-ups about the concussion and about what happened there. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned what you felt in that moment. So you didn't miss a game from that concussion, did you?
I did. I
Okay.
missed the next game. Mm-hmm.
You missed the next. You missed one game for that.
I missed one game.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was, obviously, given the fact that they didn't give you any information, what were they treating you for? How did they treat you? And in retrospect, do you think you should have kept on playing?
Well, I didn't kept playing that game, so I was out that game.
Right. I'm saying like for a longer period of time.
Oh, personal. No, I think I was okay. We did the baseline test. Now we're talking about we're about to show our age a little bit. About 14 years ago? I don't even know. I can't even count no more. But obviously technology was a lot different. And every year you do your baseline test, which was like just on a computer, and they had a couple little different things. So, like I said before, I've seen guys fail that test. I've seen the guys fail the test on purpose so they wouldn't miss games. They failed them on purpose so they wouldn't miss games. So you always go back to your baseline test, and then you got to keep doing the baseline test until you get to the score you had when you originally did the pretest. And so once I got to that score, the pretest, you're pretty much medically clear from that. But knowing what I know now is you're really never clear from it. You're always going to be impaired, even though you can build new neutron tracks. And there's a lot of new information out there now, but we just didn't have it back then. So it could have been, I think it's very subjective to whoever was doing that stuff at the time. But at the point, you already know if you got an ascending player and he's on the field, you're going to want him on the field. So they could have told me anything, and I would have been back on that field. And at that point, I didn't understand, hey, I can go get a second opinion. I can go to a neurologist. I can go this person. It was just not a thing to do because you're a football player, and that was part of the game.
And I think there were a lot of guys that you came up with who had that same attitude. I mean, I can remember so many situations talking to Zach after games where it was just clear. Right. I mean, it was just clear that he had been concussed and it hadn't been diagnosed. And you know how generous Zach is. So Zach would sit there with us in the media for like 30 minutes going through round after round after round with us. And it was just clear he just was not himself. And I can remember one sequence. There was a goal line stand against Atlanta, and he, I think, made the tackle on all 3 plays. Yes. It was a home game. I mean, he was incredible. That was, I mean, he had some games, man, but like that one, he was really, really good. But I didn't feel good about it interviewing him after the game. He just did not seem like himself. So it's interesting what you're talking about how most players would approach that. Want to get to one other happier memory here. I mentioned earlier the Thanksgiving Day game in 2003 in Dallas, and Jay threw 3 touchdowns to you in that game. And when I look back at the games where that team really clicked, that's one that kind of jumps out. Ricky had over 100 yards. What do you remember from that atmosphere?
I'm trying to think what our record was in that time. I think we were down. I believe that I think the Cowboys was literally undefeated, or maybe
no, they were
8-1.
They were actually no. You went in. You guys went in there at 7-4, and they were 8-3. Okay.
So they were one of the better teams in the NFL. I think Quincy Carter. I forget.
Yes.
Quincy Carter?
Yes, yeah. Quincy Carter with Parcells coaching. Yep.
Yeah, Parcells was there. They had a really good defensive player. They had a really good team. And just playing on Thanksgiving Day, you already know that's just one of the best days you could possibly play on as a football player. And I always just remember Wannstedt not play. I always thought Wannstedt was a coach who play like not to lose. So all of our games were always close. They were always fourth quarter. They were always a field goal away. because he really relied on that defense that he built, which is a hellified defense. He was a great defensive coach. And at that time we had Norv Turner, who was a great offensive mind. And I always felt like he had some shackles on here and there, but I didn't know the in-between things or the lines in between. But I felt like that was a game where, and I don't know if it was because we're going back to Dallas and Norv had a history there. He did not blink an eye of what Norv wanted to do. Norv literally called that game exactly how he wanted to call it. Everything that we worked on practice or leading up, and that's one thing that Norv is just really good at. And obviously that's the coach that I admired probably one of the most. And I had him in San Diego, so it's probably the offense I've been in the most in my career, 4 years out of my career, and I've had great stats out of that offense. And everything we worked on, we literally called. Sometimes you'll go through the week and you'll feel they'll make you feel damn good during the week, like you're gonna make all the plays, you're gonna get all the targets and all this, and then you don't get nothing, and you feel like crap, and then you gotta wait the next week. But that was a week where they literally called everything that we worked on in practice, and obviously it was a short week, but leading on to it, we were working on certain situations for that game, and we were just letting it go. I mean, we were letting it go. I had opportunities early in the game to make plays, and me and Jay was just kind of clicking. We had a great feel of their defensive concepts. The defense was playing great, and Jay made some great throws. I actually scored a couple of touchdowns in the back of the end zone. One got called back that was really close, and then they called the same play, who I think one of my best catches, one of my better catches, on the other side, the next play, and we ended up scoring on it. It was like a tippy-toe catch in the back of the end zone. And for myself, and then literally that's the first time I ever dunked over a goalpost too. So I don't know if everybody ever seen that or anything like that. And being a basketball guy, I was hot. Now I don't show a lot of emotion when I kind of get going, but if you see me start showing some emotion, then you probably need to just feed me the ball from here on out. And it was just one of those games where I made plays and I felt extremely streaky, and I got a chance to dunk over the goalpost in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and it was a great memory to have, and it was a coming-out party for myself and our team at that point.
All right, let's get to one more, Chris, and I know you got to pick up your daughter, and then I think what we'll do is we'll try to bring you back for 15 minutes to talk about the current team and talk about the work you're doing now. So let's just we'll loop this in. All right, so we get to we talked a little bit about the Saban era. You've talked about Wannstedt, and then 2006, Nick decides that he's going to go to Alabama. How did you experience that as a player? Because in the media, we were fighting with Nick all that time, and Nick was denying that he had any interest in that job. I will not be the Alabama coach. Dave Hyde asked him the question. Nick got very irritated about that. Did you guys think he was leaving?
We were grumblings. We do feel like he quit on us. I got to say, at least from my standpoint, I feel like he quit on us as a coach. He just was a guy who was at that point was not used to losing, coming from the ranks and having championships and just his pedigree, and I just feel like he just couldn't take it. He couldn't take it anymore. It could have been in between that. It could have been a little bit of you guys, on him a little bit, I'm sure, and it could have been a little bit of the players. No telling what the guys and type of feedback he had at that time. And for me, it just felt like he kind of quit on the team. And I think who took over for him at that point? Was it Bates?
Yeah, it was Bates.
Was it Bates? Well,
no. I'm sorry. Bates was Wannstedt. It was Nick finished the season.
Yeah, Nick finished the season. It was just it was on the Cam
Cameron,
wasn't it?
Season.
Yeah.
It was on the Cam. Yeah, the Cameron came in the next year, I believe. Came in the next season. But yeah, I mean, after that, when you're hearing stuff like that mid-season or close to the end of the season, it never kind of bodes well for your team. And I don't think we were doing that well. I mean, we finished that season before. Like, hell, I want to say we were preseason. I think we were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender preseason at that point because we had everybody in. We had Ricky. We had myself. You had Randy McMichael. You had I think maybe Marty Booker may have been on the team by that time. I don't know. Wes might have been on that team. I mean, we had a really good squad. The offenses had finally caught up to the defensive efforts of what's been taking place there, and the fact that we wasn't able to convert them to wins was tough for the coach and obviously for the players. But I think that's what kind of ultimately pushed them out. It could have been other things that was kind of going on, Obviously, we know some stories about, the way he was kind of running the organization and, having this dictator type of situation that he kind of had going on. So it could have been some stuff there too. I have no idea. But as a player, you always want to just kind of focus on yourself. But, if the upstairs is not right in the organization, it's always going to come and seep down to the players. And as a Miami Dolphin player, that happened way too many times throughout my career. It just was never steady. Was always stuff leaking from upstairs, even if it was Wannstedt or if it was Saban or if it was Cameron or, Bates that came in and tried to light a fire in front of us one year. And it was just real cool playing with him, because he just was a different type of motivational coach, and he was more of a defensive guy. But it was just never stable all the way to the point of almost right now. To be honest with you, I think, so it's crazy how history is literally repeating itself over and over with the organization. I'm just hoping that at some point we're able to kind of turn it around. And just me being a part now, I, as you guys know, I retired as a Miami Dolphin officially, a couple months ago. I would obviously be doing more things with the team. And so hopefully we can turn those things around and, have a better outcome, going forward.
All right, let me get to one more here, and then again we'll let you go, and we'll kind of prepare for the next one. All right, so after that 2006 season, Nick leaves. Wayne Huizenga tries to get him to stay. He decides he's not going to stay. Decisions made they have a search. I remember Mike Tomlin was one of the coaches that they interviewed on that search. Wow. They interviewed a whole bunch of coaches. They decide on Cameron. And then they draft someone who you knew pretty well because you played for Ted Ginn's father, and he's a legendary high school coach. And I know you had a relationship. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing you probably still have a relationship.
Absolutely, I do.
Mm-hmm. With him. But I felt like Ted never had a chance, because the way that whole thing went down, the fans are chanting for Brady Quinn. Cameron is sent into a tent or into the bubble by the marketing people to try to hype the draft pick. He's telling the fans to turn their thumbs this way. I mean, you knew Teddy a little bit, obviously, because you played for his dad. What was the transition to Cameron like, and what was it like being a fellow receiver in the room who was supposed to take somebody you knew under your wing?
Cameron was a little different because because the whole thing was like offense. We need offense. So they wanted to bring in an offensive-minded coach as opposed to years past of having a defensive-minded coach. So I think that was one of the bigger things. It was okay for me because he came from San Diego, and San Diego had a hellified offense that he was running there. And it was literally the similar offense that Norv ran too. So it worked for me very well. Obviously, it didn't work out overall because he traded me. But for the most part, it was still kind of the same similarities and concepts and stuff like that. So I was kind of okay with that. Going to drafting with Ted Ginn, I was absolutely ecstatic because growing up in Cleveland, Glenville, his father was my first coach. His father, and my uncle were great buddies. We all grew up in the same area, Glenville, Collinwood area, in the east side of Cleveland, Bone Thugs area too. I could throw that in there too. And then all that same kind of mix. So it was really cool because he was very Ted Ginn Senior, man. He was very influential in the city, and that was his start of that. Now he's almost an icon in the area and what he's done with the kids and everything. But Ted, at that time, when I was coming to high school, he was like in elementary school or something like that, but he was always around. You've seen his athletic ability, to this day. And I was very excited to pick up Ted. And I felt like I was at a point in my career where I could have helped him groom some, and us playing together on the same field after, being almost brothers growing up. It was very cool for me. And so it kind of hurt when I had to depart there. And I think they threw him and another guy, Derek Hagan, completely in the fire after I left. And it shouldn't have been like that because Hagan was starting to send some. He was making some plays here and there. Ted was still kind of coming along, but he still was young. You can't put all that on a young guy. And he, it took him a while to develop. And believe it or not, to this day, Ted about to go into 13 years in the NFL. And I don't really know how. I saw him 2 years ago. He actually trained at the facility with me. And I'm like, dude, you still really don't even know how to run routes. How are you still in the NFL? I cannot believe it. And it's been on pure speed. And he don't do a lot in the off season. Obviously, he's just an Olympic track guy. and he's one of the, he was one of the world's fastest persons at one point coming out. And he was just a great athlete, just a great football player.
He can't even catch either. How many times he
couldn't.
dropped the ball?
He's 13 years in the league right now, so this guy has all the props in the world for me. And it's funny, I just talked to him the other day. He's going to come down and train with us for me for about a month here, and he was open with me, and he was like, "Man, Chris, man, I tried to warm up today, and I felt it." He was like, it can happen like that though. It literally can happen. Like one day you're okay, the next day you're like, "Oh man, I'm feeling old. I can't move like I want to. I can't run like I want to." And he's like, "Yo, when I come there, I want to do 2 a days. I want to do this. I want to do that." And I was like, "Hold on, now, slow down. We need a different approach for you. We got to make sure you're healthy and align your body and do this and do that." And so now I'm guiding him as a 13-year, veteran receiver, which is really cool. But if we were able to kind of stay within the system back in the day, I believe we would have been able to do some good things together with those two young guys and myself still kind of ascending. And, and I was just really, I felt like I was really just getting my prime. I had a down year in 2006, but it was a lot of things around me then, coming into new money, all type of little stuff here and there that I felt like I could have did some things different. But for the most part, that 2007 year, I actually was at a really good, I felt like that was almost one of my better years, even though I split with two teams. But I was making some plays and doing some things, but I wasn't able to kind of finish it out with the Dolphins. But I kind of sparked me up though. It gave me another chip on my shoulder, saying, "Okay, I'm never going to let this happen again. I'm going to show them that they messed up by trading me to somebody else and kind of turning their back." It felt like they turned their back on me, the organization, because I would have literally went 0-16 with that team if I had to. Now I know myself being a part of a team will never go 0-16. Because I just felt like I would always have a game that would help the offense tremendously win a game, and that's just how I thought sometimes. So, kind of Jordan-esque in that thinking, or Wade-esque, but that's how I felt at moments of my career when I was able to kind of get the ball more frequently.
Yeah, there's one story about Cam before we let you go on this one. There's one story about Cam that I always heard. I wanted to see if I could validate here. It's a story about a rope in the back of the practice facility. I can't remember who told me this. Did he have you guys like do a tug of war like back on the practice facility? Because I heard a crazy story related to this, that he ended up putting all the guys on one side.
Sounds more like Dan Campbell than it does like Cam Cameron.
that definitely is a Dan Campbell thing. That is not a Dan Campbell thing. And I wasn't around Dan during that time, but that was something that they were just reaching for all type of stuff at that point. But now Cam, he was just so laid back, just very laid back, very lethargic. And so, sometimes the teams, take the personality of the coach, and that wasn't our style. We're more of a tough physical team than that laid back type of team. He had more of like a basketball mentality. He was, Indiana, he used to show us pictures of like basketball players, doing these dunks and, all type of stuff. And, he'll try to correlate it to football and something like that. And I just don't feel like the guys even understood that or even wanted to hear any of that type of junk, to be honest with you. And that pretty much was his departure from there, because he could never capture the team as a whole.
And then you ended up going to play for Phillip Rivers, so that was a whole nother
then I go play with Phillip Rivers.
Chapter of your career. Yeah, I was going to say, you didn't get Marino, but you got that's the closest you got.
It's like playing in slow motion. Literally, the ball, everything is like very slow, and his delivery is on time, and he's just obviously the best quarterback I had, and that was in his little bit younger stages. But I can't say enough about him, man, because when you left the huddle, you felt like you were going to get the ball. LT felt like he was going to get it. Gates, Vincent, Malcolm, we all like, yo, we getting the ball this time. He'll give you a little wink. He'll give you, hey, Chris, let's do this. Hey, let's change it. It was just like playing in the backyard almost. And when you're on an all-star team like that, it was awful fun. It was like we could turn it on and turn it off at any moment. And we always played good when our backs were completely against the wall. It was like, okay, now we got to turn it on. We got all these all-stars. Let's turn it on. Let's win like 6-7 games. Let's go to the playoffs. Let's do this. And, he's done that a couple times in his career already. So that's just a whole nother chapter that I'd love to talk about at some point.
We'll continue with Chris Chambers about the current Dolphins team in a second. But first, a word from one of our sponsors. Hurricane season is again upon us, and yet thousands of Floridians have still not received fair compensation for their Hurricane Irma claims. If your claim was denied, underpaid, or assessed below your deductible, you need a free consultation with an experienced insurance attorney at the law office of Lloyd J. Heilbrunn. Call 561-726-3636 or contact through heilbrunnlaw.com. That's HEILBRUNNLAW.com. The law office of Lloyd J. Heilbrunn handles insurance, personal attorney, and wrongful death cases on a no-fee, no-cost unless there's a recovery basis. All you got to say is that 5 Reasons sent you. All right, we're going to move to the next part here with former Pro Bowl receiver Chris Chambers. Last season of Chris's career was 2010, spent some time with the Chargers, then the last year and a half with the Chiefs, then retired. Can't really believe that it's been 8 years already since then. But we're going to move to the current team because you pay a lot of attention to the current team. Recently, you were one of a few guys that signed a one-day contract so that you could officially finish your career with the Miami Dolphins. You'll be proud to know, Chris, but I think you already know this because I actually saw you like the tweet that I polled this on @5ReasonsSports, and of the players who just signed those one-day contracts with the Dolphins, you were the most popular when you played. So not only did you get that honor, but you get a little bit of an honor from our listeners. But you have followed the current team, and in particular, the current receivers. And I wanted to go through some of this with you, and I want to start with the guy who's not going to be here this season. How big an effect do you think Jarvis Landry's departure will have on the Dolphins?
I guess it kind of remains to be seen for the most part. We know his production on the field, which given all the opportunities he's had over the past years and targets and everything like that. And he's been able to make the most of it, obviously, and getting one of the largest, contracts in the NFL, which is great for him. And, during that course of time, he gave everything to the city, to every practice, every time I seen him out there, man, he was giving it all. Seemed like he was really good in the community. Seemed like he was a stand-up guy, no matter what went on. He's never pointed a finger. He's just a good teammate to kind of have. And he's got pound for pound one of the toughest football players in the NFL. So, I know he had a lot of fans here that would have loved to have him on his roster again, but he had to move on. And, I definitely think it's going to be a void there for somebody to have to come in and step up and do some of the dirty work that Jarvis was able to do over the course of his short career here.
But, Chris, it seems like the overall mentality, not just from the receiving position, but throughout the roster was 2 good players might be better than 1 great player. And so they went out and went for Albert Wilson, and they went for Danny Amendola as well. And so you'd have to think they're trying to basically make up for Jarvis Landry's production in the aggregate. Based off your experience in football, do you find that 1 great player is better than 2 good players, particularly if we're looking specifically at Adam Gase's system? I think he wants to be a bit more decentralized. How would you come down on that debate?
Yeah, you know what? The thing is, the great player is a great slot receiver. So if I can get two good players, but I guess those guys are kind of slots too, Balver's a little bit outside, it might not be a bad trade-off, to be honest with you. Now, if you're talking about 1 great player who takes the top off the coverage, who scores, multiple, 10 touchdowns a year and 1,000 yards a season, and, that's a different type of guy. And it's a handful of those guys in the NFL you wouldn't trade for the world. And, I don't feel like he was in that echelon of guys. So I think it was a good move by the organization. They got some young guys that can get a chance to step up, and some current guys that's been on the roster the last few years that you want to step up and get some more targets. So it was more about feeding the other guys and making up for that instead of just bringing in the other guys. So I think that was more of just giving the guys like Steele and DeVante and Grant more opportunity to make plays instead of having Jarvis on that roster where he's going to demand all the targets.
One more thing on Jarvis before we move on to the other guys. There was a lot made of his yards per catch, right? Like it was kind of historically low for somebody with that many targets. Was that, in your view, a product of the way they used him, or in terms of throwing all these wide receiver flats and these bubble screens and other stuff like that, or was that sort of his inability to kind of get down the field? Because I feel like Dolphin fans would feel differently about this if he was even averaging 12 yards a catch as opposed to under 9 last year. What played into that?
Yeah, definitely both. No doubt, just being able to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand. We all know the offensive line play has not been stellar over the years, and to be able to just get it into his hands was a big thing for the team to do, because he's a guy who's able to break tackles, to get first downs and stuff like, and do things, underneath but he was never a guy who would catch a ball over the top or who played outside. So it makes it a little bit difficult when it comes to that point. But for the most part, I think that now that he's not there, I think you'll see a little bit more spread of the offense, obviously to more players, but definitely taking more shots down the field because, when you're playing in this league, and we used to say it all the time, and you at least have to take at least 6 shots down the field. You just have to, just because of the defense, the way things are set up. And if you consistently, dinking and dunking and having to go on 10, 12-play drives, I mean, it's not going to last for long. And that's what the Dolphins have been doing as of late, and they have to change that philosophy, right now.
You averaged over 14 yards a catch over the course of your career. Kenny Stills has been a guy who's been able to average a lot of yards per catch. And his, metrics, the statistics on him indicate that if he got more targets, he'd be extremely productive. And he actually last year, our guys who run the 3 yards per carry podcast have done a lot of research on this, and they found that Kenny Stills was among the most productive slot receivers in the league last year. He just didn't get as many opportunities as Landry. You had to make that transition where you went from, as a rookie, kind of ostensibly the number 3 receiver, even though you ended up with 883 yards, to eventually becoming a number 1 receiver. If Kenny Stills is going to get more attention this year and more targets, how do you think he'll do with it?
Right now, I actually haven't played as the number 1 receiver coming into this year. And just to touch on going back to last year, I like the way their receiver roster was set up. If I was a receiver coach, that's how I would like my receivers. You got a guy on the outside who's a big, tall guy who you want to be able to stretch the field some. You got a guy in the middle, Jarvis playing where, he can do some things in the slot that, some of the other guys in the NFL can't do. And then you have Kenny Stills, to me, who was a mix of both of those guys. Who has the speed to take it downfield, has the quickness and the toughness, a willing blocker, and that's how I would like my receiver core kind of made up. And so now losing that, going forward, there's no doubt that Kenny is about to enter into his prime of his career. He's a guy who consistently keeps getting better. He doesn't put the ball on the ground. He doesn't complain. He's not a distraction off the field. I think he's entering out to maybe his 6th year in the NFL right now, so he's definitely coming into his prime. And I believe with more targets, he has the opportunity to get over that threshold of 1,000 yards. He's always been productive of getting the ball in the end zone. I think 6 or 7 touchdowns the last couple of years. So, with more targets, more opportunities, he's going to probably get that number up some more. Actually, I think he had 9 the year after his contract year. Yeah, so you got a very consistent guy who knows how to find the end zone. I expect him to be the number 1 receiver this year, no doubt.
There was a story in the Miami Herald about you wanting to have a chat with DeVante Parker and maybe want to, talk to him, and you had kind of wanted to clarify what you meant in terms of what you wanted to talk about with DeVante Parker. So when you saw the story, did you think maybe that it wasn't totally what you meant, and how do you want to be involved with DeVante and with the Dolphins receiving group as a whole? Yeah,
that's for DeVante. I mean, he's a guy who I want to get to know, even more. He's a very quiet guy. He doesn't say a whole lot. But, he's a great athlete, and he has the opportunity to be a great player in the NFL if he's, consistent. And the biggest part of what he's been having going on has been his health. The health issues have negated him from being able to, take what he needs to do in practice, which everybody, I think it's been literally the same type of situation where he's been having great practices. You're seeing some potential, you're seeing some flashing, and it just has not translated to the game. And, when you're playing in the game and you're getting hit every game and now everything's getting a little physical, it's no doubt that you got to take care of your body. So I was meaning more of his routine. Who does he work with outside of the Dolphins locker room or the Dolphins training room? Because you have to have a team. You have to have your own doctor, your own massage therapist. Some guys like acupuncture. There's so many devices, and I feel like he needs to find out which one of those devices or which routine helps him out. With me, I was going to the chiro Tuesdays and Fridays. I got my massages Tuesdays and Fridays. I went to the coach. I mean, I had it down packed for every week, and that sustained me. And I felt like he's a guy that's just really been out of line, and he'll get one injury, he'll get that healthy, he'll compensate to another injury. And so I was more trying to mentor him from just the off-the-field basis and trying to see what did he need? In this type of year, especially right now, this is a time where you kind of experiment with certain things that you practice and you see what works for you. And that's what I wanted to kind of give to him to see if I can kind of help him get on the hump. Because I know if he's on the field, he's going to get more targets. He'll get more opportunities. He'll have more experience. and then he'll have that year that he needs to have. But, obviously, going into your third year, that was the year where you say, okay, now we want to see what this guy's about. And he actually had a decline from the year before. So that the type of mentorship I wanted to bring to him, and hopefully I still can.
Is there somebody inside who can do that too? I mean, obviously, look, you've done it and you've had success and you were a Pro Bowler. So, he should take advice from you. But does somebody in that room, in that receiver room, how does that work? Can someone like Kenny Stills I would think Danny Amendola would be great at this because he's had to fight through so many injuries over the course of his career and still be productive. Mm-hmm. How much of it can come from inside the receiver room where they kind of show the way?
Well, it should. Danny just got here because he needs probably to figure out who he can trust out here. Actually, when I left and went to San Diego, I flew my chiropractor every single game when I went to San Diego. And when I went to Kansas City, I flew him every game because I knew that was my secret sauce that was going to help me be strong. And as you know, I was a very durable player. I was always strong we didn't go in the playoffs much when I was with the Dolphins, but when we started going to the playoffs with San Diego and Kansas City, I was very strong as December, and I was, strong in January. Is because my body was always in line. I didn't have a lot of major injuries, and I didn't really have any minor injuries as well. And I was able to overcome a lot of things. And so that's the type of service that you need. And I believe a guy like Kenny. Actually, Kenny came up to me the last time I was there. It's like, man, thanks a lot for that guy that you gave me, man. That's the guy I use now, and I don't even know who I told him to go to, and it was just must be somebody that I felt that was going to work good for him, and he thanked me for it. So I would think, a guy who's been in town, a guy who's been healthy and durable, that's the person I'll be looking up to. Like, yo, man, hey, who you go see? Who's the person that treats you here? What's your routine? And so those are the questions that I know that a stand-up guy like Kenny won't keep from his other receivers. Is that going to help the overall outcome of the receiving core and the team?
And just to put this into perspective as we move to the last part here, you're you're not talking about something you don't know something about. Since you tell people about what you've been doing since you retired.
Yeah. So since I retired, I've been doing sports performance. I started my business, Chamber Fitness, literally almost right after I left. Right after I felt that, right after I was told I was able to play no more. Because I was pretty much pushed out the game once went to go check out my hip, and the doctor said, your arthritic hip, you're bone on bone, and that's it. And that was the end of the story for me. I actually tried to give a little bit of a run for a second. I had a tryout with San Francisco, and literally after that tryout, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I was so sore. I was so hurt. And I knew right then and there my career was over. But then thrusting into that, I jumped into the sports performance, looked around a couple of places, and I found a beautiful place right on 595. And hiatus and Nob Hill, and I jumped into the sports performance world, and I learned a lot from there, man. It's a lot of things that the guys can do. It's elite athletic training, combination with medical stuff, devices to help the guys recover, in combination with neuro stuff. So if you have kind of all that in your pot there, man, you're able to sustain your health. You're able to maintain your strength throughout the season in conjunction with what the team does, which is probably pretty good itself, but it just gives you a better chance to be able to succeed. And so I absolutely love helping athletes develop them. I get, being in sports performance, you get a lot of stuff thrown at you. So you get a chance to vet a lot of stuff. You get a chance to see what works for certain guys. And there's certain things that work for guys that you say, oh man, this might be something that can help this other guy. And so that's been really cool for me, all the way from the youth to the high school to the college to the pro guys. And it's been a joy to be able to help guys out and be able to see them use some of these things for success on the field.
What were some of the other options that maybe you were thinking about and sort of in retirement, things that you could have gone, and why did you choose this path?
I actually didn't think about nothing. I really didn't think about nothing. But now that I'm kind of like in the sports performance realm, and like I said, Chambers Fitness I've had for 5 years. After the 5th year, I didn't renew my lease. I ended up going over to Brandon Marshall's spot, FitSpeed, so I joined their team. I really love working there. They actually have a little bit larger facility, a little bit more recovery devices. So now I'm actually working with a team of guys that helps and support athletes. But I didn't have a plan. What I would have did, I would have went back. I would have went to business school maybe for a year or two. I think the NFL was giving guys an opportunity to go down to the University of Miami and earn their MBA through a business program. And I know a lot of guys that really benefited from that. So I kind of had to get my business education like the hard way. But I really enjoyed all the relationships and resources and everything and experience I was able to kind of gain from that. But, I love coaching. So I often can see myself developing athletes or coaching. I love doing recruiting stuff and scouting. So I'm definitely, more towards, football development and things of that nature. But staying close to the game, staying close to athletes, and being able to have some flexibility right now is what I love the most. And now I'm trying to capitalize on those resources and opportunities.
All right, and you can follow him at CChambers84 on Twitter. I know he's going to start getting a little bit more active there. This sounds like a pretty interesting topic for a podcast. Maybe you might want to look at getting into our business at some point, helping people out that way.
Yeah, you know what? And the thing about sports performance, we're in South Florida, it is completely saturated. So you have your Bomberitos, you have your Fitspeed, you have another group Perform, you got the Hive, you got Impact Sports, you got Tony Villani. I mean, you got about 8 or 9 really major players that all the guys are kind of spread out, kind of going to. So for me, it'd be really cool for me, and I have relationships with all of them. There's no bridges burned or anything like that. I can kind of go in there, and I would love to know what they do for their players, or I would love to know what other athletes kind of come in there, because, obviously South Florida is a destination for guys in the off season for training. You see people come down here all the time training. So I'm looking forward to kind of penetrating other people's sports performance and giving them an opportunity, to say what they did to help some of these guys be successful. Guys like Anquan Bones, who goes to Tony Villani up in Boca. I mean, ever since his career, he goes there to his day, And so once you kind of find that bread and butter, man, a lot of guys kind of stick with that and kind of go from there. So we'll see if we can do that, later on here.
Yeah, it sounds like something we should explore. All right, follow him. I'm a little biased here because he's one of my favorite athletes that I've covered right from the very beginning. Always been a great guy, great in the community. Chris, we really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks, man.
Yep. There's no doubt, man. Thanks a lot. I look forward to talking more about the guys. We're gonna, there's some other guys on this list that I want to kind of hit and get through. That's gonna have their opportunity to play, and we'll definitely talk about them down the line.
Absolutely. We'll do this again for sure. All right. And you can check out all of our podcasts on iTunes, on Stitcher, Podbean, Google Play, and all those other platforms. And again, follow us at 5 Reasons Sports.